do not use the justice system as a weapon. And the message for Republicans is don't do it on the other side either with this absurd AG pick that you just made. The justice is different. It is a combination of policy, law, and also morality. You do not use our justice system as a political weapon. Voters rejected it in November, and they're going to reject it if Republicans try to do it also. Some things rise above the din. The justice system is one of those things.
That was Fox News host and former Congressman Trey Gowdy yesterday warning against confirming Donald Trump's choice for Attorney General, Matt Gaetz. Joining us now, White House correspondent for Politico and co-author of The Playbook, Eugene Daniels. Eugene, great to see you as always. So you've got some new stuff in Playbook that gives insight into the fears Republican Congress members have with this particular pick, the Gaetz pick. Tell us about it.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, what we found was that senators had been talking to Susie Wiles, who is his chief of staff, incoming chief of staff and de facto chief of staff currently, the president himself, and J.D. Vance, who's kind of been the Sherpa over in the Senate for some of these more controversial picks that President Trump has already chosen. And so they're warning and saying, like, hey, this guy isn't confirmable, right? What they're trying to do is get ahead of it, right? Their hope, it seems, is that they convince President Trump, President-elect Trump, to pull this nomination back so that they don't have to take some kind of hard vote, especially for those that are up in 2026. Their concern is that Gaetz gets actually nominated. It comes to them. They feel like they have to vote against him for moral reasons. And then they're primaried and they lose their jobs, right? That's really important. They've also really have a concern about President-elect Trump wasting political capital on Gaetz in their estimation, that there are so many things that he wants to get done, some of them that are going to take heavier lifts than maybe folks around the president-elect might think, considering that they have, the three branches of the two legislative branches and the executive branch here starting January 20th. And so they want him to kind of pull back a little bit. Think about the fact that, there are other things that you want to do that are controversial, and Gaetz may not be the person to kind of blow up all that political capital you just gained in November on.
So Eugene, Gaetz is obviously the biggest headline here, but there have been a number of Trump's picks that have received a lot of attention for how unqualified, but also how controversial they are. And it seems like Trump's intent with these agencies is to, in some ways, perhaps destroy them or at least use them to punish his political foes, that retribution he talks about. But I'm curious as to what you think here, what your reporting tells you. He could have made a less inflammatory pick than Gaetz, and that person would have been confirmed and done what he wants. Same perhaps with DOD, where the Pete Hegseth pick is in question. Let's talk Dr. Oz, Linda McMahon. These are all people who might have a harder time getting through than a more anonymous official. But it occurs to me, isn't that sort of the point? Trump wants to drive his message home with these very picks?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, one, loyalty, right? Donald Trump is kind of rewarding loyalty for a lot of these folks who've had his back for a very long time, Matt Gaetz being at the top of that list. Two, he really cares about kind of central casting. We've been talking about that for a really long time. It's been a while since he's been president, so we've kind of forgot about that. He likes people who look like they should be in that role. Three, a lot of these people seem to have a disdain or a contempt for the very departments that they are up for. So that's another thing that a lot of these folks have in common. But also, more importantly, Donald Trump feels like he has his, and it's been proven over and over again, control over the Republican Party. So while we might look at the list of names and look at their qualifications compared to other folks who've held those jobs, we might think, well, something's off here. He doesn't seem to care. For him, the Republican Party is going to do kind of what he wants. He's the leader of that party, and they've proven time and time again to look past some of the more salacious details of folks around him and his orbit, and been on his side. That is his estimation at this point as well.
Yeah, now we might have some developments on the Gaetz pick today because the House Ethics Committee is scheduled to meet and discuss that probe. What's the latest you've heard as to whether or not we'll see that report?
Yeah, you know, at this point, the interesting thing about House Ethics Committee is they don't release their agendas, so everything is actually very secret, which is really annoying as a reporter.
Yes.
But what we do know is they're going to meet behind closed doors. It's possible they'll bring up the conversation about whether or not to vote. It's possible they might just vote whether or not to release it. They have a 50-50 split, Republicans and Democrats on that committee, and so it's possible that the vote goes down on party lines. But then there's also the possibility, especially for those of us that have covered Congress, that it gets leaked at some point. I will caution people who think that that is the one way that this is going to end up. The House Ethics Committee is still one of those committees that works kind of with trust and bipartisanship, right? They're going to keep losing those committees over the years. And that kind of break in trust could ruin the way that they actually operate. And that's something that both Democrats and Republicans are very cognizant of as they're moving forward on the Gates pick.
Well, my vote is that report get leaked to you. Politico's
Exactly.
Eugene Daniels. Eugene, good to see you as always. Thank you.